Aloha! My name is Shelby Morrison, and I am the Programs and Communications Coordinator at ikahi Mediation Center. Welcome to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch Series. Ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center serving East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the island of Hawaii's YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit. We empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options, and to find their own best solutions. To achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and trainings just like this one to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you do need to register on Eventbrite each time to receive that Zoom link. Our next Brown Bag Talk will be on July 17th, and this will be with Andy Pierce, who will be talking on rising through challenges, turning failure into fuel for success. The link will be put in the chat. At the end of today's talk, we will ask you to fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. When I put the survey link in the chat at the end of the talk, please just take a moment to give us your thoughts. I'll also be sending out an email later with the slides, video link, and survey link. Without further ado, let me introduce our topic, the respectful model, considering the whole person in mediation. And our speaker, Ms. Darlene Viggiano, PhD, is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a psychoeducator who is dedicated to helping adults grow psychologically and spiritually. In addition to having studied conflict resolution, Dr. Viggiano has been through the process of mediation herself. She has authored 2 books and has spoken on various psychological topics internationally. Darlene, take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to see about sharing my screen so that we could jump right into it. And please feel free. Yeah, it's working. Hooray. Hello. So please feel free, anybody, to jump in anytime and go ahead and participate. This respectful model, my idea in sharing it with you is that we would use it for ourselves to get clear on what our implicit biases are, and then to use it with our clients to get clear on who they are as a whole person before we dig into the meat of what they're trying to mediate. Because a lot of times the issue that they're trying to work on is affected by who they are and what they bring to the table. And of course, by starting with ourselves, then we get a better sense of how that comes to bear in working with someone. And then we feel more free to ask them if they want to share as well. So hopefully everybody's seeing the respectful model on their screen. And you can see that it has 10 dimensions, one for each letter of the word respectful. And it also has 3 personalization aspects. And that's what we're going to work on today. And the wild part is that we start off with one of the most taboo ones, which is religion or spirituality. And so we can identify ourselves by our religion. We can say things like, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm agnostic, or I'm atheist, right? And then from there, knowing that about ourselves, we can ask ourselves, what personal and group strengths can we develop for this particular multicultural dimension, which is religion or spirituality? And then how effective will we be with individuals who have a different spirituality or religion? So I'm just going to go ahead and, start right in by asking people to see if they would be comfortable talking about either what their religion is or what their spirituality is, and how they think it would be a strength for them in dealing with others, and how they think they would be able to be effective with people who have a different religion or spirituality. Anybody ready, willing, or able to jump in? Just go ahead and take yourself off mute. Thank you. You're speaking, but you're still on mute.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. My name is Analia Atkinson. I'm acting just for the month, subbing for the mediation director at the Kauai mediation program. My religion is like kind of a general philosophy. It's called A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles is basically says that we are all from the same source. In other words, there is one deity, call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. And that deity wanted something to love, and that created a being, a child. And then we created separation. In other words, we're all one in reality, in spirit, but we all create separation. So anyone that I look at, I feel like they're part of my religion. I mean, in a sense, there's no exclusion there. Now, that doesn't mean when we get to Earth, you know, I started out a Presbyterian. I worked with the Baha'i. I studied, you know, I've done lots of different things, but it's, and that's all fine. So I think it would help me. The one thing
Yes.
to be concerned about is if someone was really being hateful. I mean, you know, I don't know. Because in my mind, it's like because we're all in that sense of one, that we would want to mediate rather than say cut each other's throats or something like that.
Exactly. So you have a spirituality and a religion that is welcoming and inclusive.
Yes.
And the one that you would have difficulty with would be some case where there is something exclusive and unwelcoming going on, and you know that going in, so you can compensate for that. You could either suggest that they work with someone who happens to have the exact same religion or spirituality that they have, or you can say, does this really pertain to the case at hand that we need to mediate? If not, can we bracket it and let it be on the sideline so we can go through the other aspects that have much more to do with the case at hand? Does this make sense?
Well, yes, the truth is, in my heart, in my mind, in my spirit, I know that they, no matter what we think we are all part of this oneness. So they could be acting out the hateful part, but that's not who they really are. You know, that, you know, I always hope that somehow we can get them to come from that loving space, you know, but
yeah, appeal to the higher angels, so to speak.
well, way, and I know that there are rules, you know, in mediation. Somebody's disrespectful,
Exactly.
you give them warnings and you get out, and just remind
Mhm.
them like we're here to try to rebuild this relationship in a sense, so you can at least get an agreement and work with it. So I think we can do it, but anyway, that would be, that's always a challenge for me when somebody's really hateful.
Sure, I would imagine it would be a challenge for any of us.
Yeah.
And I think the point with this is that since you're comfortable identifying your own, and you might feel comfortable with offering that if they think it's an issue for them in the particular case, that they could share theirs, and that, you know, you can help work with that. And if it's not pertinent to the case, we could just move on to the next issue, or the next dimension, which is economic and social class background. Anybody ready, willing, or able to share about theirs and how they think it could be a strength and how they could have difficulties based on it?
Hi.
Hi.
I think there's a propensity to identify with the social class or the economic class of which you are part.
Yes.
And so particularly the large middle class of social class population tends to be challenged by encountering persons who live at the poverty level. So I think that it's I identify as middle class, but I've had training in understanding how to work with persons with poverty and even whatnot. So I think that I could be effective in helping them. Being aware of that middle class bias is often a challenge.
Yeah, and then there's the other side of the coin too, or that's very funny that I use the word coin with economics, but which is that how would you be able to relate to people who are so wealthy that it might seem like they're acting privileged, or what's that other word people use these days? Oh golly, I'm losing the word, but it's one where they think they deserve to be able to get away with anything because
Entitled.
entitled, very good. And so how would your economic and social class background still be a strength in working with them, or could it be something where there would be a challenge there because of that? Like, for example, reverse discrimination against the wealthy or something silly. I don't know. Anybody have any ideas about that? How would you, have you worked with people who had a higher standard of living than you did and found it challenging to work with them as a result? Or maybe not as a result, but as a byproduct.
I can pipe in on this. This is Katie Bennett.
Mhm.
When they say, now I have to fly commercial and they can't be on the private jet anymore. And you're like, I'm so sorry. That must be so difficult for you.
I hear you. I hear you. Yes. And then, especially if this is part of the case that they're dealing with, like let's say it's a high stakes divorce case, you know, and they're concerned that they're going to go from living in Beverly Hills to living in, you know, some other area that's not classy in their mind, even though it's a fine area to actually live in, those kinds of things. Of course, we're talking Hawaii, so maybe we should say going from Honolulu to where I lived, which was Pahoa. Very different scale of lifestyle between the two. Okay, let's look at the next one, sexual identity. This is a big deal, especially right now, because people are concerned about potential discrimination and those sorts of things. So how comfortable are we identifying ourselves if it's not already obvious in some way, shape, or form? Some people choose to use their pronouns, some people choose not to. And, you know, how is it a strength for you? And how is it a challenge? Suppose you use pronouns and they don't, or you don't and they do. Does it matter to you? And again, if let's say it's a divorce case, are you equally able to handle a divorce case between a heterosexual couple, a bisexual couple, a same-sex couple, a trans couple? How does this work for you? Anybody willing to speak to this one?
I find the pronouns confusing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and a lot of people do. And so some
Not intentional. I want to
right.
do what they prefer, but it's just, you know, our English language does not have a third gender.
Right. And so what some people do as a workaround is just keep using the name of the person as opposed to the pronoun for the person. It can be cumbersome, but it can also avoid other kinds of awkwardness when we might forget and use the wrong pronoun, so to speak. Okay, good. Thanks for being willing to share about that, because that is a challenge for many people, and some people are afraid to even say it's a challenge. How about personal style and education? And here I would have to add personal and political style because that's become a really hot topic now. Anybody willing to identify how their personal and political style is a strength for them and how it is a challenge, and how they might deal with someone who is of a different political ideation, for example, or personal style or personal education level?
I'll comment.
Go for it.
So I find that especially now we're noticing where if someone wants to express an ideology, there's a lot of identifying with those beliefs. So it can be a challenge, I think, to move to an area where people are really finding common ground, because I find that a lot of the times, whether it's a political belief or a religious belief, or really just personal views, people can hold them very strongly and it becomes almost like part of their identity. So to be flexible in that, or to consider other viewpoints, it can, I think, for them feel maybe scary or like they're wrong for for considering other perspectives. And so I find, especially nowadays, where people are really kind of honing in on, this is my identity as my political belief or my religious belief or my worldviews. This is what I think is right. Therefore, you're wrong. And if you think I'm wrong, then I am wrong, rather than, maybe my beliefs could use some opening up. So that's I think a bit of a challenge, because many of us have only been exposed to a certain number of views. So
yeah, I'm finding, say, for example, on social media, there are some people who are in a feedback loop and that will only be friends with people who have their same exact shared views. And then there are others who are wanting to be inclusive and opening and welcoming, and they're willing to be friends, neighbors, associates, co-workers with people who have the opposite identity. Like, we could think of the judges on the Supreme Court. I remember Alioto and Ginsburg were in opposite camps, and yet they were friends outside of the courtroom. And I don't know if those options are still available for many people today. Many people might have decided that, you know what, I can't cope with that anymore. We're not playing that anymore. I can only deal with people who mirror my image, and don't know how to deal with people who don't. So this is where, to be able not just to identify our style, but also to be able to figure out, well, what does that mean for how I will have a strength coming into mediation, and how I will also have a challenge coming into mediation, and what do I want to do about it? So that's a really key issue that you brought to bear on this. Let's look at also ethnic and racial identity. Is anybody willing to discuss this one with us? Maybe how it's played out in their profession, or how it's played out between them and their clients, those kinds of things. Is everybody here currently working in mediation, or are some people in other fields and just interested in the matter or the topic? For me, I'm in marriage and family therapy, so mediation comes up, but it's not my main gig. Catherine, were you wanting to say something?
I was going to say I work in the public schools, so I'm interested in the skills.
Do you find that you have to mediate between parents and teachers, or teachers and students, or where does your area of Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah. Okay. And does ethnic or racial identity come up as a factor in any of that? I would imagine it could easily.
I think so. It does. Racial identity is something that frequently comes up. There's a lot of misunderstandings
Mm-hmm.
in Hawaii around racial identity,
Mm-hmm.
as well as just in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mhm. I think one of the areas that becomes most pertinent here is when is something actually a discrimination issue, and when is something a performance issue that gets also conflated with a discrimination issue. So we have to be open to the possibility that both could be at play at once. There could be both performance and discrimination issues going on at once. And does our particular identity allow for us to accept that there is discrimination or that there is a performance problem? And do we have challenges if we see it one way and the person that we're working with sees it the other way? Maybe we see discrimination and they see performance, or the other way around. And what are we going to do about that as being the issue? Let's look then next at, this says chronicle, but it really should be chronological, or lifespan status and challenges. Just let me explain this a little bit before I ask you about it. For example, generation gaps, or time of life issues. Maybe someone is in a midlife crisis and they're trying to deal with someone who's, an adolescent, and those kinds of things. So thinking about where someone is, where you are in your own life, where I am in my own life, and where the person I'm working with is at in their lives. Anyone can speak to this one. This one is a little bit more nebulous, but it can become very poignant when there are clear and present differences between the two people who are trying to work together or who are in conflict with each other.
Well, I can jump in on this. I'm the state long-term care ombudsman, so I work with folks in long-term care facilities, and nobody thinks that I'm going to eventually end up in a nursing home or a care home. And lots of times they actually didn't choose it. It's their children who chose it for them. So there's I'm not a professional mediator, but I do it all the time. I'm also a social worker. And so I deal with folks who have to deal with losing their home, going on Medicaid, on welfare, something they never thought they would do, having to leave a spouse behind, and so not seeing that person every day, which you've done for 60 years. Yeah, lots of issues. I'm also for the Executive Office on Aging, I'm the shop steward for HCEA, so that's also mediation. So yeah, it's very, very complicated. People need to vent, people need to speak, and most facilities staff are so busy, they cannot sit and spend half an hour or an hour or however long just talking story with somebody, but that's actually what the ombudsman does. So we tell them, because they're very conscious of, oh, am I taking too much of your time? And it's like, no, you're the reason I'm here. So if I spend the whole day just with you, that's fine with me. I want to hear your story. I'm really interested in who you are. And they really appreciate that.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. You have one of the best jobs in the world. Congratulations. That's very cool.
Thank you.
I think one of the challenging places in this one is the sandwich generation, where they're trying to deal with both their aging parents and their young children at the same time. And they're having to bridge the gap between the two and also learn about ways where the two extreme ends of the generations can be helpful and enjoyable to each other, bringing the seniors and the children together and that sort of thing. But I really appreciate what you brought to bear on this piece of the exercise, because the whole point is to be able to identify where we are in our lifespan and where our client or the person that we're working with is in theirs, and how that could be affecting how we're able to relate to each other and connect with each other, and take into account all of the issues that they might have going on. One of the big areas where this comes up in the senior population is, might we be dealing with a, age-related cognitive decline, and could that be affecting how we're able to mediate a particular conflict? And do we have to bring in others and things like power of attorney and what have you? And the possibilities of people being abused, either financially or medically or what have you, because their voice isn't being considered fully and appropriately, and there may be even some discriminatory aspects going on there as well. Which this also leads us into the next one, the trauma and the crisis. Like you were talking about before, when people have to leave their homes and go into care homes, this could be a trauma for them. This could be a crisis for them. This could be something where it's affecting their behavior, it's affecting their relationality, it's affecting their connection with those they care about and those who have cared for them. So here's another one where I would like to check in with folks and see if you can identify any crisis or trauma that you yourself might be going through, or that you might be ready, willing, and able to ask your client about, and how it might affect any conflict that you're trying to mediate for them. Anyone have experience in this area?
Well, our experience of a trauma is not identical to their experience of the same trauma. So it's important to keep that in mind, that we need to listen to and help facilitate them telling what their side of things are without interjecting our own experience into it. I have another meeting I have to go to.
Okay.
So, I look forward to watching the rest of it when the recording comes out. Aloha.
Yeah, I am so sorry to see you go, because you just brought up an incredible point that I'm going to speak to, which is when we had the Maui fires. There's no way we could have really appreciated the trauma and the crisis in the same way as a person who was on the ground there. And so we tried, and we wanted to help them with the crises that they were going through and the traumas they were going through. But it was really, really a huge challenge, right? Are there other people who maybe even
Before I go, because
Yes.
it's going to bug me, what's L? Because I can't see L.
Yes, let's do that. And you're
Thank
gonna
you,
get
just so I
these.
know.
Yeah, L is location and language. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
definitely about that. Yeah, you're gonna get this and also the PowerPoints that go with it.
Yeah, but it'll bug me the rest of the day. I'll be trying to figure out what L was.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have to go to my other meeting. Aloha.
Thanks for your participation. Language and location.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So yeah, okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is F for family background, family history. And in this one, we're looking at things like, are we dealing with a single person? Are we dealing with a two-parent family? Are we dealing with Hanai family? Are we dealing with foster care? Are we dealing with elders in a care home where they're separated from their family, but perhaps they're making family with people of their own age on a social basis or a soul basis? What are we talking about here? How does our family background affect what we bring to mediation, and how does the family background of another affect how they're able to deal with conflict? Would someone like to speak to this topic?
Someone had in the chat Hanai. Hanai is kind of like adopted or taken in, maybe not
Yes.
blood. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and of course, you know, when we think of adoption in other US terms, we think of it as a formal kind of thing, but in Hawaiian terms, it could be very informal as well. It could be spiritual, it could be social, it could be economic, but it doesn't have to be the whole legal shebang of an actual adoption process. And people, there are so many, like I knew this one auntie who had so many Hanai nieces and nephews. It was like astounding. But many people in other parts of the United States would never even consider such a thing. Either you're adopted legally or you're not. And then we just say things like, oh, they're like a cousin or they're like a sister to me, but they're really a friend or a neighbor or what have you. But this family background issue and the family history can come into bear quite a lot with how we identify ourselves and how we deal with folks who have a different family background. So now that we've gotten the technical issue of Hanai kind of a little bit introduced, is there anybody who would be willing to disclose or identify their own family background and history, or how it has affected them to work with people of other different family backgrounds and histories?
Well, I can jump in and just, this is Pride Month. And so I was at Mauna Lani Nursing Home yesterday, and I just casually asked them, what are you going to be doing for Pride Month? And they didn't have any plans. And that's actually the case with a lot of our nursing homes. And they celebrate Mother's Day, they celebrate Father's Day, they celebrate Independence. I'm sure they're even celebrating Juneteenth. But you can say that you are a welcoming community, but somebody who is not your traditional heterosexual and has a partner or spouse, they don't always feel very welcome in a nursing home about expressing their affection for one another. You have to go back into the closet. And so, families can be of your choosing, because maybe your own family rejected you for being different. And especially now with the Trump administration, hell-bent on persecution, these are very dangerous times. And just, I think today, the suicide hotline is no longer going to be taking in calls for people who are LGBT. So they used to have special counselors that could handle that. And the Trump administration has decided that doesn't fit his agenda. So I think we really have to go out of our way to make sure that everybody feels welcome in our long-term care facilities, and family can be however they want to describe who are their loved ones, who are their important contacts.
Thank you for bringing that up. It reminds me that in Canada, they are opening up a special hotline for those here who no longer have one. It also reminds me that we tend to minimize or disregard the sexuality of seniors, like as if, LGBTQ is only a topic for people, 65 and under, and it's not an issue for people who are elder, and that's just simply not true. And yes, you can see how these different areas tie into each other. We're talking family background, and yet it tied right into political, it tied right into, so many other different things. So yeah, this is a huge area. And I really appreciate your bringing to bear what you brought forward here today. That was awesome. Thank you for that. And let's look also at you for unique physical characteristics such as disabilities, skills, and abilities. Anybody on this call working with people who are other abled? I hope so. And things to do with seeing, hearing, wheelchairs, maybe even people with gifts, right? And how does that affect, and maybe things like Asperger's or ADHD, especially for those of us who are in more social work and family and marriage kind of therapy sorts of situations. But for sure also in mediation situations and with care home situations and with issues of advocacy and rights and sort of areas where we need to take these things into account. Is there anybody working in those fields that would like to speak to this? Go ahead.
Well, we take everybody. I mean, you know, it's like we are ADA accessible, you know, there are ramps they can get in. We have a room, you know, that can accommodate them. People will sometimes tell me when I'm doing an intake, I'm ADHD. And I'm like, I can listen fast. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, it's just, you know, uh, I think we've been able to, I don't think there's anybody that we have not that's come to us. In fact, we are the organization on the island that takes care of the 40 homeless. So sometimes sometimes we deal with issues over there, you know?
Yes. And the homeless can end up with disabilities that they didn't necessarily start out with, or they can end up being homeless because of disabilities. And so all of these things need to be taken into account. Okay. Good. And let's go ahead and look at L, which is location and language. So in Hawaii, the languages are many. We are not just talking English and Hawaiian, we're talking Filipino, we're talking Tagalog, we're talking Korean, Japanese, Chinese. Who else? Anybody working with any other languages?
Also
and
Pidgin.
Pidgin, absolutely, for sure. And how about location? Are you noticing the difference between working in an inner city population, say, for example, in Honolulu, and working with people out in the rural areas where, you know, maybe Pohoiki or something, where people might not even have access easily to some of the services? Anyone can speak to
language,
this.
I can tell you a quick story about language. There was a Korean lady who emigrated to Hawaii and worked in the hotel industry. And she wanted her children to become good Americans, and so she never taught them Korean. And now she lives in a foster home. And as is common with people who have dementia, she only remembers that first language. She can no longer remember how to speak English, and her children never learned how to speak Korean, so they cannot communicate with one another.
Wow.
And luckily, we have an ombudsman volunteer, Albert Lee, who is Korean American, was born in New Jersey, but he's bilingual, and so we use him as a translator. But there is Google Translate that you can put on your smartphone. And when I used to visit facilities, because I started in 1998, I don't speak Cantonese, I don't speak Visayan, things like that. And so I was only really advocating for people who speak English. And the others would smile and I hold their hand, we make some kind of contact, but I really was not very helpful. And now with Google Translate, I can have a conversation with them and we can go into a quiet corner so that we have some privacy. And now I feel like I'm really doing my job because I'm able to advocate for people in almost any language. Actually, the only one that I have found out that they don't have the verbal part, but they have the written part is Hebrew.
Wow.
But I haven't met anybody who speaks only Hebrew, so that hasn't been a problem yet. Yeah, so Google Translate is a very good option for people who no longer or never did learn how to speak English.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's awesome. What about the aspect of rural versus inner city? Anybody working with or dealing with that? Or the kind of residence, like we were talking about group home versus, single family home versus all the different ways and shapes and forms that people can live.
I've noticed, Darlene, so when we have some mediations, I'm not a mediator, but I have noticed that when we have, mediation scheduled, I know it can sometimes be a problem if someone has to, maybe drive all the way from Pahoa, if they've got to drive like an hour to meet, and they have to get there on time, whereas someone else is just 5 minutes up the road in Hilo. But everyone's trying to meet at the same time and they've got their schedules, and then you have to deal with traffic. And then, if they're trying to do something virtually, then there might be internet issues. So sometimes I think that perhaps that can be misconstrued as, oh, well, they just don't care as much about this mediation, or they just don't really want to show up. And it's not at all that, but location really does impact someone's ability to show up and how frequently, because mediations, it's not one and done. I mean, it's frequently they've got to show up, and that's quite a demand to not only have to travel such a distance, but then manage schedules and school and work and all of these things. And so it can kind of be misunderstood that they're not caring as much, when really it's a hurdle for people.
It is. And then also there's the issue of going into these places if you're doing outreach, right? What's the difference between doing outreach in an inner city area versus in a rural area? How would you do it differently? Let me go ahead and start sharing the screen for the slides that you're going to get. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So this whole thing came about because I was studying conflict resolution at one of the University of Hawaii community colleges. And we picked up this model and we started working with it. And then we started breaking it down. Ooh, I just realized I'm not sure how to advance the slide from here. Whoopsie. Any ideas, Shelby?
So if you go up to the top toolbar where it says slideshow.
Oh yeah, okay, perfect. Let's try that. We'll start from current slide and we'll see how that works. Okay, yeah. And then I should just be able to hit like maybe the space bar to advance.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
or you can click. Perfect.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Yeah, so the idea then was that each of us students in the class would fill out that sheet, identifying ourselves on each of the dimensions and identifying our strengths and our challenges that we bring to bear based on those identifications. And so these are the questions that we would ask ourselves to do that. And then, as I was mentioning earlier in the session, once we did that for ourselves, then we started to see, could we do that with others, maybe our classmates or maybe clients that we were working with, to get a fuller awareness of who they are as whole persons and how that could affect any kind of mediation that we were trying to do together. So again, in that spiritual dimension, you can go ahead and use your sheet. I don't know, do you guys have paper copies of that sheet, or do you only have it as a slide online or something?
They'll get that when they get their slideshow.
Okay, all right. So, I would take that item and make a copy of it so that you have one that you could fill out for yourself and one that you can make further copies of for any client that you want to do it with. And having done it yourself, then you'll know, how to help them to do it for themselves. So in these slides, all I'm doing is giving you some examples of how it was for me to do it for myself. I identified my religion and spirituality as Quaker, and the strength being that we believe and act on the basis that all people have value, and that there's goodness in everyone, and how that helps me be effective with others. It gives me a way to value our differences and allow other people to feel acceptable. As we talked about earlier, one of the areas that would be tough for me and would be a challenge for me is working with someone who has a very exclusionary kind of religion or spirituality, where, if they were to find out that I was anything other than what they were, that they wouldn't be able to work with me. And that would be a choice that they would have. That would be okay. I was working, I consult, I act as a consultant for people who do clinical hypnosis. And this one clinical hypnotist that I'm working with, she had a client who had extreme religious stigma against another particular religion. And my consultee happened to be of that religion. And every time that client came in, that client would berate and badger, knowing that my consultee was of the religion that was, stigmatized. And their hope in doing that was that they would be able to exorcise this demon out of them, of the stigma that they were putting on these people. And luckily, my consultee was able to withstand that enough that it allowed the person to see that none of this could be true, because otherwise that person wouldn't be able to withstand the onslaught. And they were able to start to make inroads in getting better around those stigmatizations. So that was pretty amazing. For the economic and social class one, for myself, I identified as middle, and giving me an ability to relate to certain privileges and also to certain struggles, because middle class people have both. And my effectiveness is based on my acceptance of other challenges of things I personally haven't experienced. So recently I worked with some deportees and some refugees, and hearing about how they went through the jungle and seeing how people were trying to carry things on their back that they could barely even load on their back, much less carry through miles in the mud and whatever it is they were going to do. And so my ability to relate to that challenge, or not be able to imagine that challenge, but be able to relate to the suffering of that challenge, even though I myself personally haven't experienced it, helped me to be able to relate to them, but it also helped me to be able to relate to my own challenges as something that could be coped with compared to what the heck they were going through. And so these are the kinds of things that you want to ask for yourself and ask for your clients what it is that they've gone through. As a marriage and family therapist, I have worked in organizations where people from different economic and social class backgrounds were being treated, and the professionals or paraprofessionals who were working with them had originally come through some pretty harrowing circumstances themselves. I've worked with people who became counselors when they themselves had originally been boat people. So that's pretty extreme. That's a pretty amazing feat and accomplishment and triumph and turnaround for them. So that helps them to be able to meet others with challenges of a very extreme sort and show that it is still possible to have resilience and to thrive. The next dimension, S, sexuality. I identify as cis hetero, but easily relating to social norms because I happen to fit in one. But at the same time, being female alone there's already an area where I can relate to gender discrimination because it's happened, right, to me and to other people of my gender. On the other hand, based on my ability to accept diverse senses of self, how I see myself, whether I'm cis or not, whether I'm hetero or not, or however I identify, and being able to have acceptance of people who have orientations to other different kinds of partnering. For the first time in my life, I met a man who was pregnant, and I didn't know that that was possible. And it is because the person was transgender. They were male on top and female on the bottom because they only had partial surgery, and that's okay. And some people can relate to folks like that, and some people would have great difficulty working with a pregnant man. So we need to know these things about ourselves, and we need to not assume that because we see someone who looks a certain way, that they are a certain gender. Next one is P for personal style and education. And we also discussed adding politics here, and I really think we need to do that. So for myself, I identified as intellectual and educated. At least I think other people see me as somewhat intellectual, and I know I'm educated. So on the one hand, it gives me an ability to understand complex concepts, but on the other hand, it makes me have to take care to use plain language rather than jargon when I'm working with clients who may not have had the access to the kinds of educational resources that I've had. Is this making sense? Okay, good. And then dimension E, ethnic and racial identity. I identify as Italian American, so that fits me into white racial culture, yet I have experienced and understood ethnic discrimination. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where people could be called things like wops and guineas, and that was just for my particular Italian American aspect. You could, if you were Hispanic, you could be called other things. If you were Jewish, you could be called other things. And so I won't go into those because I'm not of that culture, and it could sound like it's coming off in a way that I'm not meaning it. but I could say Guinea and Wop because I'm Italian American. But those are things that I dealt with as a child, right? And we don't think of that as being, I don't even know if people use those words today or in Hawaii. Does anybody, has anybody noticed that? Like, are these words used in Hawaii, or are these words used in this day and age? Anybody have experience with that?
I've lived in Hawaii since 1985. I've never heard anybody use it, but I was also born in Brooklyn, New York. And I think it's a generational thing. I think people my dad's age definitely still use those terms.
Okay.
But not young people.
Mm-hmm. So there might be people in Hawaii who wouldn't even know what a guinea or a wop would refer to, and wouldn't even know what you're talking about. If you said, oh, I was called a guinea when I was a kid, or I was called a wop when I was a kid. And people in other parts of the United States might not know, what a hapa is, right? Or a haole is, or any of those kinds of things. And so people might not be able to relate to those kinds of ethnic and racial, possible stigmas, right? Okay. Let's go into Dimension C, chronological lifespan status and challenges. For me, I'm newly 65, I'm mid-divorce, I'm mid-expatriation. And so I can relate to senior challenges, I can relate to grief and fear, I can relate to the need for community support. And so for other areas, I have to be able to relate based on my memory of past challenges and based on my imagination of future concerns. So for example, what will it be like if and when I become less able-bodied as an older and older person in a country that I didn't grow up in, using a language that I didn't grow up with, and being an older divorce perhaps by then. I hope my divorce doesn't last forever. I hope it actually ends at some point and I'm finally and fully divorced. But what will it be like? And how will I get care? And, will there be anybody to take care of me when I can no longer take care of myself? These are things that I can imagine that if I had to deal with a client now who felt like they were in that situation, I would be dealing with them based on my imagination of how that would be for me, because I could face that.
All right, Darlene, we are at the top of the hour.
Perfect. So you can go through the rest of these slides yourself when you get them and see, what it is for trauma and family background and unique physical characteristics and location and language. And so now, even though we're at the top of the hour, if there's one last question, comment, concern, or compliment that you would like to leave us with and have the last word, go for it. If everybody's good, then I'll just thank you for your attendance and your participation, and I appreciate your taking the online survey.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming today. As a reminder, please just take a few minutes to fill out our short survey online. Give us and Darlene some great feedback. This really helps with our grant funding for this free series. So you can find that survey link in the chat. Be sure to also check your email in the coming days for the slides, the handout, the video link, and again, that survey link. So mahalo, and we will see you all next time.